All right, so today I want to talk about sculpting a simple stone block and creating the displacements as well as the normal map, and perhaps some of the things that come up with that. This is a great way to create stone walls, the interior of old buildings, even things like furnaces and that kind of stuff. Great way to create building blocks, or at least how to develop some maps and things like that for that. So let's get started. So I have just a fairly basic block here. And a little bit higher poly than normal just because I want to go in and sculpt it and then later displace it. Doesn't need to be much higher poly. I wouldn't probably keep it this high poly. You could probably strip out a couple of these middle polygons after I was done, but I think this is going to be great to start with. So let's start with this, and the first thing that we probably want to do here is just check out its UVs. Because this can cause a lot of problems when it comes to your displacement map or with your normal maps. So, hey, we take a look at this, it's the default. We're like, hey, that's fine until we take a look at the checkers. You can see that they're stretched a little bit. They're not all quite the same size. So let's definitely fix that. The other big problem that will really throw off things, especially like a normal map or a displacement map, is if it overlaps into the next tile. So we can see that this actually does not fit within its square. We would want to make sure that this was inside. And I'm not sure why, but a lot of Maya's defaults sort of are outside that single tile and create some issues. But before we do any further, let's go ahead and create our own edges here. I'm going to just break it apart at the points of the corners here, so that each face has its own. And I'll just go ahead and say cut, right like that. And we'll do that again here, and we'll say cut, and another one there, and say cut, and we can even grab that one right there and say cut. Good. We've got all of those. Let's grab all of those and do a cut. There we go. So you can see those are split up. Let's go ahead and grab these UV shells and unfold them. Now, I could go ahead and do a layout on this. I'll just go ahead and do that. I'm not going to worry about that too much right now, because what's going to end up happening is that this is not going to be my final model. I'm going to do my sculpting, and then I'm going to export this out from Mudbox as well. So for right now, though, this is a great place to start. So I will take my object here. I will delete its history, and we'll leave that to translate there. That doesn't quite matter. So let's take this now into Mudbox. So we'll say File, Send to Mudbox as a new scene. And there it is. And you can see it's fairly small. We're also bringing in that the Maya camera, which I don't like. So I'm just going to right-click and say Look Through the Perspective Camera. And then I'll select this and actually delete it. That can sometimes cause a lot of problems. The other thing I'll do is I'll right click and I'll go ahead and assign a Mudbox material on there that we'll use just to help us sculpt. If you hit W, you can see there's our wireframe. Let's go over into our sculpt layers here and make a new layer. And let's go ahead and hit Shift D a couple of times. We'll do it maybe about 4 times. We can go ahead and turn off W there for that wireframe. And just because it makes it a little easier to sculpt and things, I'm going to go over into my scale here and take this object and scale it up evenly. All right, very important that it's even, so it's a bit bigger to work with. And then lastly here, I'm just going to turn off my grid because I really don't need to worry about that too much. Now, again, if we take a look at our UVs, oh, where's our UVs? They're gone. Well, it's because if we page down to the lowest level, they exist on this level, but they don't exist on the higher levels. And for right now, I don't really care about that. That's perfectly fine. What I want to do is do a little bit of sculpting. And the thing that I like to do for rocks and blocks and stuff like that is to use the scrape tool. That's a really great tool to use, as well as this stamp image right here with a bunch of randomization settings. And so we can create those. Now this stamp comes from right here. Right there's that stamp, and we can create. Now you can always use other stamps if you want, but this really makes nice rocks. All right, so here I have that. I don't need any snap curve on here. I'm not really worried about the buildup. I will make sure that my falling off is that standard sort of ease in and ease out. I'll bring this brush up a little bit, something like that. You'll see my strength is pretty high as I start to sculpt this around here. And so you can see very quickly I'm able to get some general shape here with the rock. So we'll just put that in there. Sort of quickly go around and modify that a little bit. We can even take some of those corners in a little bit. Just go in and grab all of that. Great, and that gives us a really nice start for our rock. We can bring these down and maybe grab one and grab a corner that's all beat up. Now the cool thing about creating rocks and stuff like this is, hey, look, there's one block. Hey, look, there's a completely new one. And so you can often get away with creating maybe 3, 4, 5 blocks in your scene, and then you rotate them around, and you're getting all kinds of different blocks. So giving you some pretty cool results there. All right, I'm going to take this now and subdivide it a little bit more, 2 more times to up to 6 layers here. And I'm going to change my direction from average normal to the camera view. That way I'm sculpting directly in the view that I'm working on here. And I'll start to add some extra scrapes in here. Nope, I chose Z on accident. Let's do that. Let's undo those 2 things. Camera is the one I want. All right, so we can see, start to get some cool detail at a higher level. You can bring this a little higher. Maybe I'll put that back to the average normal. I'm just sort of sculpting around here a little bit, trying to get some more detail into this area. Now, if we wanted a sharper edge, something over here, we could sort of sculpt that down. All right, you can get a little sharper. We could also use the sculpt tool, and we'll go ahead and put that same exact stamp in here, and we'll randomize it up here a bit, something like that. And we've got a fairly low strength and size. Let's bring that size up a little bit, maybe do this on another layer. And we can see here, let's bring that strength up. That's a bit too high. Let's bring that maybe to 20. And let's check our fall off. Let's go with this wider one right here. You can see right there. So getting some cooler detail in there. A little bigger. Adding some detail into that. Getting some very cool texture in our rock here. Can even do a little pinching, bring things in a little closer if you wanted. Right, there you go. Then go back to our sculpt and do the scraping a little bit more and bring this down. Maybe have it go even nice and deep in there, something like that. We're going to keep it fairly simple today, right? But, you know, get some cool results here. Let's make sure I'm getting all my sides at least, just so I have something on everything. All right, cool. Let's go back into that sculpt tool. Get a little bit more of that finer detail. And we could also invert this and go inward a little bit just to add some more variation. Back and forth. Size will change it as well. Okay. So anyway, we'll stick with that for right now. All right. You could keep working on this, right? This is I find working on these kinds of things a lot of fun. But we'll leave that at this. Now, let's go all the way down to our lowest level, and you can see that it's been a little deformed, right? So we're going to take that and export that to Maya. So let's do that by going into File, and we're going to send to Maya, and we'll update the current scene. And it asks us, hey, nothing is selected, the entire scene. That's perfectly fine. So we'll say OK. Now, why did it come in super big? Well, remember how we scaled it up to 10, 10, 10? So we're going to take this, we're going to take all those and put those back down to 1. And you see, OK, there we go. And we replaced the original block, and it's, you know, a little bit different in form, right? But, you know, there we go. We've got that. Now, this is why we didn't worry about the UVs right away. We're going to open up the UVs again. And so we see these in here. Now watch what happens if I select these UV shells and do another unfold. You see how they've changed based on that deformation that we had from what we did in Mudbox. And so that's important. That way we get good checkers and all of that kind of fun stuff. Now I'm ready to lay this out a little bit. So I'm going to hit Shift and click on Layout. And in here I've got 2048. I'm going to keep these values a little higher. I want a little bit of space so I don't get any bleeding. And we definitely want to make sure that we have the preserved 3D ratios on. So I'll just go ahead and say apply for right now. And you say, okay, let's maybe set this to be horizontal, maybe neaten it up a bit. Okay, not bad. I bet that if I turned off horizontal and then rotated this one a bit, something like that perhaps, and then did the apply here again, yeah, my objects got a little bigger, got a little bit more space there. You could definitely, you know, move some of your objects and get a little bit more organized, something like this. So in case you had other uses for the map, like for games or something, you wanted a smaller rock that you wanted to squeeze into these UV spaces, you absolutely could do that. I'm going to leave that right there. And so we'll go ahead and close this. And we'll delete our history again. Right? And then it's very important that we update what we sent to our Mudbox, right? So let's just take this and we'll say File, Send to Mudbox, and we're going to update that current scene. So let's go back now. You can see there it is. Okay. Now we did lose our layers, but we didn't lose those sculpts. All right. So that's important to understand, that we didn't lose our final sculpts, and we can always change those, etc. Now, what I want you to see is, let's go to the lowest level, and we can go to UVs and like, hey, they've been updated. That's great. We can also, all right, now go to the higher levels, and we can see that those UVs have been built for all of those higher levels. And that's going to be super important for when we create our normal map, which let's start to work on those displacements and normals. All right, so here we have this. I'm at the top layer here. Let's go down to level 5, level 4, level 3. I think my level 4, maybe even my level 3, shows a good amount of displacement. And then maybe from level 4 to 6, or 3 to 6, I'll use that for my normal map. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go over here to UVs, and I'll extract a map, new operation. I'll call this displacement, right like that. And I'm going to say, okay, aim for my level 0, but I'm going to take it from level 3. And we'll leave this at subdivision. I'll put this up at 2048, and let's export this out into my project folder here. And I'll do this as a TIFF, and I'm going to go ahead and call this block underscore displace underscore A, in case I had a couple, those 5 blocks or so, A, B, C, etc. I don't like to do 0, 1, 0, 2, just because that implies that you've got versions instead. So I use my numbers for versions, my letters for different types of blocks. All right, so I'll just go ahead and save this. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off that display as bump. And I'll extract this. And hit OK. And we'll close that. And let's go take a look at that in Maya. So we'll jump back over into Maya. So let's put a new material on here. I'll right click, say new material, and we'll go ahead and we'll use Arnold for this. We could do Redshift as well, whatever, but we'll just go ahead and use Arnold. And let's do the AI standard surface shader. Let's get rid of the specularity. We don't need any of that. I'm going to put sort of a light gray on here so we can see that a little bit better. And then I've also already got a dome light in here with an HDR image, and I've got an area light in here as well. So we're just going to use this. This isn't going to show up in the render. Let's just render this and see what we get. You can see there's our plain old rock there. Okay, excellent. Let's go ahead and prepare this for our displacement. All right, so let's take this object. Let's open up the Hypershade, and let's graph that material. And then in here, let's go into our displacement, and we'll go ahead and put in File. And in the File node here, there it is. All right, we will choose that displacement map, and I'll say Open. Okay, so it's in there. You see it's trying to update itself in the back here. I'll go ahead and just pause that for a minute. You can see a little bit of it is there. Let's just pause that for a second. So remember, we have a black and white image, and it's 32-bit. So both of those things tell me that I should come in as raw. The other thing that you're noticing is that I'm coming out as alpha into my displacement. So I'm going to go in and go into my color balance and make sure alpha is luminance is on. All right, so we'll do that. And then last but not least, because we're in our Arnold's settings, we need to go into the shape, into Arnold, and turn on our subdivision so that we can get some displacement going on here. So let's use Cat Clark, and I'll use maybe, let's do 2 and see what we have for that. And let's go ahead and kick off this render and see what we get. And see, now we're starting to get some of those different details in here. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and stop that for a minute. And we could bring up our scale a little bit just to see what that does. Yeah, see, we're getting a lot more detail. I think that's probably a little bit too much. So let's bring that maybe down to like 1.5, or let's see what that looks like. I think that looks a lot better. So we'll stick with that perhaps. 1 is probably what I have in Mudbox. We'll see from there. So let's just go ahead and stop that. Now let's go back to Mudbox. Because now I want all of this cool little detail, right? So let's go down to level 3. See, yeah, that's about what I'm getting in, Maya, right? So, looks pretty cool. So now let's create and extract a texture map here, and let's do a new operation, and we'll call this normals. And we'll do normal map. And this time I'm going to start with the default setting of maybe 3. We could even do 2, but let's do 3. And then grab it from level 6. So it's the difference between those 2 layers. We're using subdivision again. We'll go ahead and make this 2048. Make sure that we're using Maya and soft margin tangent. And let's save this. And I like to save my images out as targas that are color-based images. I'm in the right folder. I'll go ahead and call this block normal, right like that. And we'll save that. And we can turn that off. And we'll go ahead and extract. Great. Let's put that into here, right? So let's go ahead and grab an image here, just so we can do a before and after here. Right, so we'll just minimize that for a minute. And what I find is the best way to, since we're using Arnold, is we make sure that we use the Arnold nodes. So we'll hit Tab, and we'll type in normal, and we'll choose the AI normal map. We'll put this into our, I think it's normal camera. Right, let's just make sure that that's the right spot. Should be right there. Yep, that's correct. And then we're going to create a file in our input. So we'll go ahead and choose File. And in there, we'll go ahead and choose our normal map. There it is. It should be like this tint of blue with some greens and magentas and things like that in it. Now, key thing is normal maps should also come in as raw. That's important, and we're coming out of the color into that input. Right? Now, sometimes in some circumstances, you need to turn on invert Y. I don't think we'll need to, but let's take a look at the render here. So let's go ahead and trigger off another render here. Look at the extra detail that we've got in here, right? Giving us a pretty cool looking result here. I think we may need a few more polygons for our displacement map, but let's just do a comparison here with another snapshot. So this is without normal map. There adds our extra detail. We could always even bring up our strength here a little bit like that and see what that looks like. A little stronger. Let's turn that off. There we go. Yeah, see, that came out a little stronger than that one, say, for example, right? So, you could play around with that a little bit. You could even exaggerate it some as desired. And then we could put textures on and all of that fun stuff. I think I want to do one more thing. I'm going to add a few more iterations with my my subdivisions here. I'm going to put that up to maybe 4 because I think I'll get a little bit better of a result. So let's just take a look at that one more time here with Arnold. A little bit better, a little smoother in spots, bringing out some of those details and gives us a pretty cool looking rock. All right, cool. Let's do that exact same thing with Redshift, just in case anything is different. So the first thing that we're going to do though here is turn this all off. Right, we want to make sure that's off because we're going to be working with Redshift now. So I'm going to right click and say assign new material. And I'm going to put a Redshift shader on here, right like that. And I'll open up my Hypershade, All right, you can see right there it is. And we're going to go ahead and just bring some of these same images into this here, but we have to do them slightly different. All right, so first things first is let's bring in the displacement. You know what? Let's bring them in just from scratch. We'll just do that, right? So we also, let's switch out our lighting scheme here. So we'll get rid of those. We'll switch over into a Redshift render view. You can see that we don't need lights for the Redshift, so we'll just use that for right now. All right, so first let's add that displacement. Now in Redshift we want to make sure that we use a Redshift displacement, and so we'll bring that into there. We'll bring in our texture map and load that displace in. Make sure it's set to raw. All right, good. And let's go ahead and map this so it's nice and neat. There we go. And because this is coming out color, we don't need the alpha is luminance. All right. And now let's go in and add our bump map in here. So we'll go in and grab our file, and we're not going to use this here, but we'll go ahead and bring in our normal map, right? So this is like a standard bump map. So we're going to tab, and we'll type in normal again, and you can see we have the Redshift normal map, right like that. And we're going to bring that map in just directly right in there instead. So we'll go into our source images. There's our normal. And we'll put that right into there. We can just delete these guys. Great. Let's see what else we have to do here. We need to take this and in our shape go into Redshift. We need to enable tessellation and enable displacement, and we can control how many subdivisions and things right there. Let's go ahead and see what this looks like. Look at that. All right. So both of these techniques work super well. I'm going to stop that for a second. I'll show you what we can do with this now that we have this. All right. So I'll just move this off to the side. I'm going to take this block and go ahead and clone it. So we'll move one over here, and I will rotate this. Let's rotate this 90 degrees, something like that. Let's have it maybe something like that. We'll just bury it into the ground here a little bit. Maybe do the same thing with this one. Just bring both of them down, something like that. Let's clone that again. We'll bring it here. Oh, let's see here. Let's bring this around like this. So we'll make that 90 degrees. Let's rotate our X direction here, put it back to where it was. We'll pull this back here like this. We'll maybe put that something like that. Let's take this one again and we'll clone that. We'll rotate this one around the x-axis 180 degrees, and maybe pull this down like that. We can even maybe scale it down just a tad, you know, something like that. Let's take this guy, duplicate it. Let's rotate it. Oh, something. Let's go to there. I don't think we've seen that angle yet. We can even leave it slightly. Whoops. Let's put that back to where it was. So we'll duplicate that first. Let's make this -90. And we'll scale it down a little bit. Maybe bring it over just something like that. And we can bring that guy over here. It looks like that's exactly the same. So, you know what, tell you what, let's go ahead and just rotate this one. We'll bring that one like that in right like this. All right, and so hopefully you get the idea of what I'm doing here. I would probably also create a box or a plane that I would sort of fill in with like the mortar in there, right? And I'd put like a nice bumpy texture or something like that on there. But let's just see what that looks like, just with that basic setup, right, like that. So we'll go into Redshift, Render View. And I've got it open over here already, and we'll go ahead and set a progressive render. Look at that, right? And so they all look like different rocks, right? And you could, even throw, like we could take this one here and, deform it some more, move things around. Just as long as you didn't mess it up too much, you'd be fine. We could go in and do like a lattice deform. Well, maybe not. Maybe that would mess up that. So maybe not do that. But anyway, you've got some. I think I probably messed that up permanently. Oh well, we'll just delete that guy. But anyway, very cool sort of rocks and things that we can create. And set up to create, an interesting type of wall or whatever. So hopefully that was fun for you. Have fun playing with this.